Hello, and welcome to week 6 of Introduction to Data Science. Before we get into week 6, as always, let's just have a quick little reminder of what we were looking at last week. So last week we were looking at effectively communicating our results, both through visualization, but also through coding, and so designing studies as well in order to actually, do data science in an effective way. You can see from the readings that this kind of shows through here that, we talk about exploratory data analysis, some of the applications, how we can design studies, and then also the Tidyverse guide too. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of things, all on the theme of doing data science effectively and well, so others can use your visualizations or use your code or understand that the results that you're collecting are correct. Everything should be up now for you to see, including the code along and everything. So you can always return to anything if you didn't manage to get through all of the content last week and you think that that would be useful moving forward. So one of the questions that came up quite a lot was questions 7 and 8. So let's walk through them and have a look at why some of the questions were a little bit difficult, on why some of the answers were the way that they were. So if we have a look at 7, it's normally easier to have a look at what's not correct rather than what is correct for now. So in this plot, you're being asked which would necessarily improve the visualization, which is not necessarily the same as saying that make it look nicer, just to kind of demonstrate what your visualization is trying to get across better. So change the background color of the plot. Well, that seems like something that might make our plot looks a bit nicer. It's a preference to use different themes, but it wouldn't necessarily improve the visualization here of what it's trying to demonstrate. Here, flip the coordinates, so months are on the y-axis and mean departure delays are on the x. Well, typically when we have a date and a time, we want to have that on the x-axis because it kind of looks like a timeline. Now, this isn't always the case, but most of the time you're going to want to have your time along the x, just to demonstrate that that is a time variable. Use bars instead of lines. I'm not sure this would be particularly helpful here, certainly not in the place of the line plot here. And, change colors of the lines. Well, the color of the lines kind of giving us, maybe you could say that, you want to use more different colors that maybe contrast a bit more. However, the main pattern here is that it goes up around these middle months and it goes down here, and I'm not necessarily sure that colors would necessarily change that visualization anyway. But what is useful is adding a title. It's always useful to add a title. So whenever you make a plot, please always add a title. Indicate units of the mean departure time. That would be useful to know what these 10 and 20 are, because as it is, it's not necessarily easy to know what that means just by looking at the plot. Remove underscores. Yeah, that would help us here. Mean depart delay. I mean, you could probably better explain what that actually means by using full words for someone who's just looking at this plot with no context. Replace the X labels with the month names. That's going to be a lot useful because, then we know exactly that this is January, February, March, and 2.5 is probably a bit confusing. You could get a misrepresentation of this graph and thinking that, we're starting from a certain date and moving forward, which we are in this case. We're starting from January, but you want to make that super, super clear that we're not starting from, I don't know, November, and then that's 2 months after November or something. Obviously, it's pretty clear that's not the case, but, you want to make extra sure that what you're trying to demonstrate is really coming through. And place airline names on the end of lines instead of at the legend. That'd be useful for your eye to be able to follow, and you can do this in ggplot. For example, if we had, ExpressJet here was at the end of this line, then we could know where, you can follow it back. It is a lot easier to do that than just have it in a legend here as well. So hopefully that explains that one. Let's move to question 8. Change the background color. Well, we talked about that last time. That's kind of like a preference thing. It's not necessarily going to change the information on how we can clearly communicate what we're trying to communicate in this plot. Use different colors. Again, that's just to kind of, make it look a bit nicer. That's not necessarily improving the visualization in a meaningful way. Place the carrier names at an angle. Well, we could place the carrier names at an angle, but in this case, the problem seems to be more that you want to flip the coordinates, because if the carrier names here were on the y-axis, it would be a lot clearer. Because they'd be overlapping. And if you kind of flip them at an angle, you'll probably have to tilt your head to see it. And it'll just be much better if you just flip the axes entirely and that they're running down here. And use a histogram. Well, we have a categorical variable here, so the histogram's not necessarily going to work. And the ones that do use airline names instead of carrier names, well, if it's on the y-axis, that's going to be a lot clearer. Fix the scales. So that the carriers are in order for each and the counts are on the same scale. Well, that's going to be useful because here, when you're trying to compare these two airports to this airport, you might think that they have a similar pattern. But if you look at the scales, you see that 20,000 is right at the top and this is 40,000. So you can get a misrepresentation of what this visualization is trying to show you. Flip the coordinates, so carriers are on the y-axis. We've already talked about that. And add a title. As I say, it's always good to add a title. It makes it extra clear what this visualization is trying to show you. So hopefully that clarifies the answers for question 7 and 8. I realized these were quite tricky in the way that it was worded. Necessarily is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. But the aim of that was to try demonstrate what is improving the visualization, not necessarily what's making the plot kind of look nicer, but really what is going to help us communicate what we're trying to communicate with this visualization to the audience. What's going to improve that? So one thing I want to run through is the use of a very helpful package that will help your different scripts to be able to find where your data is in your projects and for your workflow in general moving forward. So let's start with this blank version of the project, and I've filled a few little things in. This should be very much like the projects as you had them previously before you started working on them, and hopefully you haven't changed around any files from this template anyway. It'll make it easier when me and Alex are marking if your projects generally stay in this structure, so we can make sure that we can find everything we need to when marking your work. So if you open up the README, for example, then it says here that you can load your data here if you like. And because we're in this README section here, we need to navigate to our data. And the example data I'm given is addresses.csv, which if you go in the data, you can see I've stored in here now. So in order to get to this data, all we need to do is we need to tell its read.csv to go inside the data folder and to load up addresses.csv. And that's going to work nicely. However, if we're inside our proposal folder and I run the same thing, we're going to get an error saying error in file cannot open the connection. Okay, and that is because it's looking for a folder from here, looking for data, and it can't find one. In fact, if we want to get to data, it's actually back one and then inside data two. So we can do that by doing ... meaning go backwards, / data addresses. And now it will load. However, I've got an even better way for you to doing this. Instead, what you want to use is you can use this library called here. And here, when you first load it up, it says down here, as you can hopefully see, here starts at cloud/project. Which is essentially telling us where the kind of base bit of where it's starting from, the file path where it's starting from, is going to be when you use the here function. So that's really useful. So we know that here starts at cloud project, which is just here, right? You're going to hear me say the word here a lot and it's going to get annoying. So sorry about that. So if I type here, use the function here inside the here package, and just put this in the console here, you can see that it goes cloud, project, data, addresses, which is the correct file path to our addresses here. And then when I, run that and run this, then it finds the data as well. And the reason that I really recommend using the here package is because it's consistent. So not only when we're in our project, inside our project area, inside our proposal, which we were here, but if I go out and back to that README that we were in before, if I copy and paste this exact line here, data addresses, it is also going to work as well, because the here is always starting at the same place. So it means that the path to get to our data is always going to be the same, regardless of if we're in this top area here or if we're in any of these folders here. That should hopefully help with locating where your data files are, and I really think you should give it a go. Now this week we have web scraping and programming. As I all have already announced by now, we've moved the quiz deadlines. Quiz deadlines are always going to be on Wednesday, so you've still got a little bit more time to work on quiz 4 if you haven't already handed it in and you were having problems over the weekend handing it in. As I say in my announcement, this is due to a lot of students trying to use the quiz at the same time. I've made a few changes my end, and I've also extended the deadline from now on to have 10 days instead of 7, so you've got a bit more time to spread out working on the quizzes than you currently have. And so for the rest of the week, we ask that you give us some more course feedback. That'll be really useful for us to see how things are going on and identify any further issues and any tweaks that we can make to the course, like the quizzes and what you've been telling us about that. We have the videos as always. We want your project proposals in tomorrow. Now remember, the project proposals are just that, a proposal. You don't need to have a full project ready for us. It's just so me and Alex can have a look at what you're thinking of doing, and so we can make sure that you're on the right track before you start working on it for the rest of the semester. We also have the first homework in for Thursday. Remember, homeworks are to be worked on individually. We're going to try get the feedback to you from homework 1 before this deadline. However, remember that the overall deadline for us to get you feedback is 15 working days. So there may be 1 or 2 people who haven't got it by now. And I'm sorry if that's the case. We do shuffle each week, or each fortnight in this case, the marking allocation. So the time that you get marked and by who is going to change every time. So that should hopefully balance out as well. And yeah, we have a number of readings. We do really recommend having a look at the documentation for the selector gadget this week. That's going to help you with parsing HTML websites. And we do have some readings on functions and iterations, because this week when we're parsing websites, it's really useful because we're going to be doing stuff repeatedly if we use functions rather than writing our code out over and over again and copying and pasting, and again with iteration to loop over things as well. So please do read those and to watch the videos. They will generally make your code run a bit better and generally be a lot easier to read if you start using functions instead of just copying and pasting sections when you want to do something multiple times. We have a number of interactive tutorials this week, which, if you're struggling with either the homeworks or you just think you need extra practice, especially on functions or iteration, then please do them. They should be useful for you as well. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope to see you all soon.